Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
And we welcome you to this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy. We are both now at places we haven't been to that much in the last 3 to 4 days, Murph, and that's home, regular home.
I was just getting used to having John Giuliano Park just be my permanent home.
Well, it'll probably be later in the year. This is a special edition. We're going to be breaking down baseball's opening weekend of the start of the 2020 season. What did we learn from this team after sweeping Siena in a 4-game series? Plus, we'll recap softball's second weekend of the year and first 11 games in general off to the second best start in program history. What does that mean moving forward? Also, did we get to hear the angriest that Johnny Dawkins, head basketball coach, has ever been during his time as head basketball coach at UCF? Murph will give us the answer on that, and why is he so mad if he is? That and much more on this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Of course, you could check us out on social media throughout, and, of course, check us out our content at blackandgoldbanneret.com for all the latest in UCF as we break down all the sports. And, of course, follow us on Twitter and our favorite place there, UCF_Banneret, and like us on Facebook as well. All right, Murph, let's start with baseball. Of course, the season started Friday night. We've been waiting for it. We did the special baseball preview show last weekend. We didn't know what to expect with all these new faces, and at least the Knights sweep Siena. They squeaked by a really good first game on Friday night, 2-1, a well-pitched ball game that went about 2 hours and 25 minutes. But then dominated the rest of the way on Saturday, sweeping the doubleheader, and then winning on Sunday to wrap up the 4-game sweep. Obviously, it's Siena, so nobody's booking trips to Omaha just yet. But, Murph, what's your take now from the first 4 games of the season? What's your big takeaway from this weekend?
Yeah, I guess before we get into, waxing poetic about how great UCF baseball was this weekend, we should off the top mention that UCF has now won 20 consecutive games against Siena, and They are 58-4 against them all time. So, so all of this probably needs to be viewed on a curve because it is Siena, but early returns are promising. I think you have to start with the pitching. UCF, I believe, used 14 pitchers this weekend, and they only used one guy more than once. It was Billy McKay. And so they talked a lot about how deep their pitching staff is, and how deep and talented it is. And I think you saw a good amount of that. A lot of strikeouts, 58 strikeouts over the 4 games of the series. And also they struck out the last 13 men they faced on Sunday. That was Jack Sinclair. The last 13 outs were all strikeouts on Sunday. Jack Sinclair's last 10 outs were strikeouts. And then McKay finished the 9th inning on Sunday with 3 Ks of his own. Offensively, fine, kind of spread across the board. It wasn't like someone had a great series. Jeffrey Pena was probably my player of the weekend. He went 5 for 13 at the plate. He scored 4 runs. He had a home run, which, again, for a guy like that, just to show the power, he hit the home run Sunday. There's absolute no doubt to left field. It's a guy who just didn't exist last year. That power didn't exist in him. But Tom Jostin reached base 7 times during the doubleheader. And then you kind of like I said, spread around. I think Jordan Rathbone and Josh Crouch each had 4 RBIs. Ben Rushing had 4 RBIs. He hit a 3-run home run in one of the doubleheader games. And then Andrew Brate and Matt Archer each had 3 RBIs. So again, the offense was kind of balanced. No one really shined, but they all sort of did. Everyone did their part, but it was really the pitching that stood out if you're looking for marquee performances.
I thought Jeffrey Pena kind of lived up to the hype, right? I mean, we had Coach Lovelady on the baseball special, and he talked glowingly. He's been talking glowingly, honestly, since you and I talked to him in fall ball, at the end of fall ball, going back to that last game of the Black and Gold series, and we had him on in the fall, and he talked about Jeffrey Pena being the best player back then, and you mentioned what he did offensively, but maybe the play of the weekend, Murph, was his defensive play in that, what was it, the top of the eighth when he threw out the Siena base runner at home plate from center field that preserved the lead that they would go on to win 2-1 there.
Yeah, I mean, it really was the defensive play of the weekend, no doubt. It keeps the game in the Knights advantage. It was, I believe it was 1 out or 2 out. I'm looking really quickly.
One out. It was 1 out.
1 out. Yeah, so it was a base hit to center with a man on second, a pinch runner on second, no less. And I will say, it was kind of shallow. The ball wasn't crushed, a line drive off the bat. But Pena charged on it really well, gathered it in center field. I definitely don't blame Siena for sending the pinch runner Yasser Santana around in a situation like that where runs are hard to come by. But Pena made a fantastic throw. He thought initially that he had overshot the catcher, Josh Crouch, but the throw was right on the money, and it beat Santana by 5 or 6 feet. It was absolutely fantastic. Kept the Knights up by 1. Then David Litchfield got the next guy to ground out. So, yeah, it was the play of the weekend. Also, I believe Pena stole 3 bases or 4 bases.
Three for three. 3 for 3 this week.
Yeah, and we knew he had that. We knew he's got that. I mean, that's really what we all knew about him last year. It's like, well, we know he can run because that's all he did. But now this entire series, you saw him steal bases. You saw him play the field really well. You saw him get on base no matter how. You saw him just get on base regardless. You saw him muscle up for a homer. He did everything. He really was, I think, the star of the weekend offensively.
Yeah, he stole 3 of the team's 13 bases this weekend, Murph. 13 of 15 UCF stole bases this weekend. And, Coach Lovelady, that's what he wants to do. We talked so much about him, and we'll get into the pitching in a moment about his philosophy, but he loves to steal bases and be aggressive on the base pads, and they were there, 13 bases. Pena had 3 steals. You had Pablo Ruiz with a couple of steals, Noah Orlando with 3 bases, Connor Allen with 2 bases. So they were aggressive in the base pads. And the other thing that impressed me was, all the different lineups and different options that they have. I mean, you saw Andrew Brake play it short and Noah Orlando split time this weekend. Ben McCabe, who had a really good weekend, hit .333, started him splitting time with Crouch at catching the position and the ball there. They got a lot of versatility and depth, and I don't know, did you get the sense there? I mean, Greg talked about that a lot when we had him on in our previous show, but I got a sense he felt really good about it even when you guys talked to him in the postgame.
Yeah, and you saw it. I mean, not only what you just mentioned, but also Nick Romano and Connor Allen splitting at first base, Jordan Rathbone and Pablo Ruiz splitting in left field. They have versatility around the diamond. They can move guys different positions. Tom Jostin played second base, but he can really play around the infield. And I think what is most promising to Lovelady is that all those guys got playing time, and all of them did something. All of them didn't look completely overwhelmed by the moment of playing D1 baseball, for most of them for the first time, either as freshmen or JUCO transfers. They all had their moments where they were able to at least announce their presence. So despite more so than just having those guys around and thinking you have that versatility and that flexibility, it's good for them to go out and show it, and all of them did in some aspect this weekend.
So it's promising, and they produced a lot of runs with Dalton Wingo really non-factor this weekend, Murph. I think he went 2 for 17 this weekend. Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into that. It's Dalton Wingo. He'll be fine. I think if there's one guy in this lineup that we know is going to hit at some point, it's him. So, yeah, you can look at it that way. I will just say also, though, still, it is Siena. I mean, this is a team that UCF has not lost to since 2013. Again, good to see, but we will see what this team is really made of, not only on Tuesday against Stetson. I don't want to go too far because we still have to talk about the pitching still. But going forward with the opponents that are on the horizon, we'll learn a lot more about this offense than we did
this weekend.
Well, we knew coming in that the strength of this team was their depth and their pitching, and boy, that was showcased. Again, I know it's Siena, but as a staff only giving up a 1.75 ERA this weekend as a staff, striking out 58 batters in 36 innings, only 13 walks. I know maybe that's a little bit much, but still overpowering teams, only giving up a 191 average. So many fascinating storylines from this weekend in the staff. Colton Gordon, opening night, putting on a gem, 10 strikeouts in the game in a 6 1/3 to get the win. You saw Hunter Patterson, their debut, the kid that was drafted in the 35th round by the Chicago Cubs. He was spectacular in his performance as well. 7 strikeouts in his win in 5 1/3 innings. But perhaps the biggest story, Murph, maybe not just for baseball this year, but one of the bigger stories in UCF athletics this year when we look back at this 2019-2020 year potentially is the return of the sheriff, Joe Sheridan, who made his first start since 2018 on Sunday and stepped on the mound after a real serious injury, which obviously you've documented and we'll discuss here.
Yeah, I mean, it's been almost 21 months to the day of Joe Sheridan's last outing before today. He underwent surgery on May 31st, 2018, to repair his shoulder labrum in his left throwing shoulder, and it's been 626 days from that date to today where Joe Sheridan got back on the mound. And he said it himself, and it's totally true. One, you're right, Eric. This is the story of the weekend. I know Joe wasn't the best performer of the weekend. He didn't have the shiniest stats, but having him out there looking healthy, looking comfortable, throwing 4 decent innings, that mattered most. And it mattered most to Joe, too. So we got to talk to Joe after the game today. Everyone was clamoring because Joe Sheridan, people forget, was the ace of this staff as a freshman when he was a freshman All-American in 2017. I can't understate, for those who don't know, how big it is that he's back because he looked totally lost in 2018, could not throw a strike. We now know why. And then he spent almost 2 years trying to get back here, and here he is again. So certainly we want to talk to him after today's game, and we did. We caught up with Joe Sheridan, and we talked about 4 minutes about not only today, but the journey, what his emotions were like, and he gave us a pretty good perspective of what this day meant for him.
It was just kind of like a relief knowing that I was going to get the start, and a lot of the game day preparation stuff, like stretching out, just felt weird to finally get back in that rhythm and just kind of like get into that routine again. But warming up out in the outfield, just saw all the familiar faces and long running. All the people who kind of helped me get through the whole process were here today, so it was a really good time. And there's stuff to work on, obviously, but for the first time back, it was pretty good.
How long did you have those nerves? More than just the start?
I think it was about 5 minutes, and then I was out in the sun for 5 minutes, and then I was like, wow, I don't know if I missed Sundays. But no, it was good. The first few pitches were kind of all over the place, but I settled in and started to feel comfortable again.
Was it emotional for you just to kind of be out there and just remembering all the things you've gone through in the last 2 years to get back to this point?
Yeah, I think it was just knowing all the ups and downs I've been through. And just to get back on the mound today, the results could have been perfect or could have been terrible, but just to get back on the mound was enough for me today, and did pretty well. Had some ups, had some downs today, so just still got stuff to work on now, but it's glad to be back.
It speaks to the work that you've had to put in these last 2 years.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a lot of work, and now that all the work's done, to be able to be healthy and be able to get back on the mound, now I can really start all the work to be as successful as I used to be out there. So now the real work starts.
Did it feel good? That 4th inning was really your best inning, so to leave on that sort of high note, did that feel good?
Yeah, I know. I finally got in a rhythm. I wanted to get back out there, but first weekend, obviously, we all have pitch counts and stuff. So, I was okay with it, and to end on a high note like that, I was hitting all my spots, mixing in all the pitches that inning, which I wasn't doing all the other innings, so that was probably the best way to end it for today.
So what do you want to work on now going into another start?
Fastball command, the free bases, I hit the guy, tried to do some stuff early with the changeup, hit the guy early, which led to a run, and then the 2 walks led to a run too. So cutting down on free bases and knowing, I let up 2 hits in 4 innings, so if those guys aren't on base, 2 hits in 4 innings, they don't have a shot at scoring unless they hit it out of the park. So just limiting the free bases and keeping the ball in the zone is something that's going to be really important for me.
What did you think of Jack Sinclair's performance following you?
Yeah, Jack's gotten better. We've got that whole class Wingo, Jeff, and Jack have gotten way better every year. And the stuff that he's doing right now is really special. And he's a great kid and super nice. Everyone loves him. So everyone loves to see him have success.
You said the real work starts now. You've looked forward to this day for so long, but now that it's over, does it kind of feel good you can move past it?
Yeah, I know. It was like this whole build-up to one day, 20 months, whatever it was, just to get back out there and do that one thing. So now that I can just be another one of the guys, nobody gets super pumped up to watch me pitch. It's all just about the team now and not really about me. So I can just get back to working and trying to help the team out as much as possible.
What do you think about the pitching staff after the weekend?
This is a good staff. So to be able to make it through 4 games and have a guy come out like Jack Sinclair in a 4th game on a Sunday of a 3-day weekend and 4 games, there's a lot of dudes on this staff right now, and getting out there on the mound is going to be competitive for all of us. So it's really exciting. I think it's probably the best staff we've had since my freshman year. But the offense looks good too. The starting 9, and we had guys switching in and out all over the place this weekend, and there's a lot of talent here.
You said you were up and down today, but did you feel close to the Joe Sheridan of 2017?
Yeah, I think I was competing a lot. You know, even when they were scoring runs, I was making competitive pitches, and that's kind of what my whole thing's about. I know there's going to be guys on base. I'm never going to blow guys away like a Jack Sinclair was today, but making pitches when I needed to do that is kind of what I'm good at. So there are some glimpses of that today, but hopefully it's something I can improve upon in the later outings.
So there's Joe Sheridan, who, you know, you can hear it there. I think as much as this Sunday was about him, he is happy that this is gone, because he doesn't now require all this attention. Doesn't now require everyone to look at every single pitch he's throwing as if, you know, it needs to be studied under a microscope. We now know he's back. He's healthy. He will work off the rust and work out the kinks, but now it's normal again. And that's the biggest part, I think, for Joe.
Yeah, and I know Coach Lovelady was happy for him and proud of him after the game. What'd you think of him overall? I mean, just being there, I know he struggled a little bit early, battled on, but really you could argue his best inning was his last inning. And I would like to think that moving forward now, his confidence will only grow now that he's gotten over the hump at least and pitched, right?
Yeah, no, it just he knew this day was coming, and he knew he had nerves and emotions attached to it. So just to get through this day without getting, you know, absolutely shelled or suffering a re-injury somewhere, he got through it healthy. He pitched fine. That's what matters. You know, and now he's done with it. He can move on. I thought early on, you know, his velocity's fine. His velocity's never going to blow you away. He sits at about somewhere between 83 and 87 with his fastball. He works a changeup into the low to mid 70s. That was fine. The problem was his location wasn't great. He wasn't spotting particularly well. And then Siena, give them credit, they were not chasing Joe's pitches down in the zone. They were not chasing the changeup. You know, Joe thrives on ground balls. That's where his bread is buttered. He didn't really get that today. He really had to battle the first few innings. But like you said, Eric, that last inning, the 4th inning, totally clean for him. Struck out 2 guys, then got a little grounder back to the box. He said after that, that he wished he could have gone back out for the 5th. But with this being the first weekend of the season, all pitchers are understandably on pitch counts. He had thrown 84 pitches at that point. It was the right move to take him out of the game. And again, there'll be better days for him ahead. But I think leaving on that note with his best inning right in his rearview mirror, I think that's a good thing.
For more on the Joe Sheridan story, Murph had a one-on-one interview with Joe Sheridan on Media Day, UCF Media Day Baseball. You can catch that on our episode 199. We had Joe Sheridan on in that one-on-one interview. We aired that on episode 199. That's in our archives. You can check that out wherever you listen to our podcasts. Certainly go back. It's a fantastic interview. And really, Joe opened up to you, Murph, of all the struggles and what he had to deal with for the last 21 months. So I certainly encourage people who don't know the full story to go back into that episode and listen to that interview because – and I mean it. I mean, this is a significant story in a lot of ways for UCF athletes. You know, so much focus and understandably on Mackenzie Milton and his, you know, horrific injury, and he's trying to come back. I mean, Joe Sheridan, some people wondered if his career would be done at this point. I'm sure there was doubts. And for him now to be back, and not only that, as I talked to Coach Lovely when we had him on last week in the season preview, he could pay big dividends here. Of not just from an on-the-field standpoint, but being that kind of one of the leaders on that staff who's been through the ups and the downs for this young staff, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like you said, he's been there. He's done this. I think the doubts. I don't know if I ever doubted. I will say this. I don't know if I ever doubted that Joe's career was going to end. You know, like we have lots of questions about McKenzie. There's a lot about we don't know about McKenzie because no one is very few people have ever come back to play at a high level athletic sport after what McKenzie's gone through. Shoulder injuries, shoulder labrum tears happen. However, it's worth pointing out, and Joe mentions it in the interview, that he had some doubts. I mean, when he was coming back initially after the surgery and was kind of cleared to start throwing again, he was topping out at 71 miles an hour. He had nothing in that arm, and he just didn't know if it was going to come back. And so I think he did have a little, maybe doubts too strong, but he maybe wondered oh no, maybe it never does come back. So yeah, that it is just part of his journey. I appreciate Joe being very honest about really what seemed to him to be, not only an injury, but kind of an existential crisis of a guy who all he's done in his life and all he knows how to do and what he loves most is to pitch. And now he can't, and he doesn't know if he'll ever be that guy again. And Sunday, today, was the first step really where he could say to himself, okay, I'm close now to being the Joe Sheridan of 2017.
No question about it. The question will be, what will be Sheridan's future in the staff? He started the Sunday game. It was the fourth game of the series. The first three starters, Murph, Colton Gordon, as we mentioned, the 10 strikeouts, 6 1/3 innings, one of the best opening night starts ever. Trevor Holloway, dominant, 5 innings, 9 strikeouts. In his performance, only 3 hits allowed. And then Hunter Patterson going 5 1/3, as we mentioned, 7 strikeouts, only allowing 1 run. What was your thoughts on the other 3 main starters? Because now the question moving forward for Coach Lovelady and Coach Adi and the staff is who's going to be your weekend rotation now, especially going into next weekend when you're going up to Auburn to take on the Auburn Tigers, who's nationally ranked. It's going to be fascinating how that rotation sets up.
Well, it's a good problem to have, right? Because let's say one of your guys, if it's Patterson or Holloway or Gordon, I will say right off the bat, I think Gordon's locked in to the Friday start. He proved it on Friday that he deserves it. So until something bad happens, he's the Friday starter. Holloway, I wasn't overly impressed. There were some command issues that sort of troubled him last year that I think you saw on Saturday as well. But because of his experience, his knowledge of the program, and he had a quality start as well, he'll stay in the rotation. I think Sunday is kind of the question mark. Do you go with Patterson as a freshman at Auburn, or do you trust the experience of a Joe Sheridan? But let's say one of those guys gets lit up. Well, you have the other guy in the bullpen, and then if even if you didn't want to go to him right away, you could go to a guy like a Jack Sinclair, who was absolutely lights out today against Siena, struck out 10 guys in 4 innings. You can go to a Jalen Whitehead, who could give you 2 or 3 innings, a different kind of pitcher, a soft tosser, but they have lots of options. Plus, Zach Hunsaker, who didn't pitch this weekend because he's a little banged up, he could be back. He's a guy who can go 4 or 5 innings. They have lots of options, not only in the middle relief and into games, but in the first 6 innings, if things go wrong, they have guys who can really cover the gaps.
You mentioned St. Clair. He put on a show. You could argue he was one of them. What was it? Didn't he strike out like 6, 7, or what was it, in a row there where he was just on fire, striking guys out consecutively on his way to 10 strikeouts? In fact, Lovelady in the postgame, and maybe I'm reading too much of it, he said, hey, we got to reconsider some things there. Made it sound like, hey, don't count St. Clair out as possibly being a starter down the road here either.
He could possibly be. Maybe so, as if it's just even as an opener,
right?
Which Lovelady has certainly broached. But yeah, Jack Sinclair today. So yeah, he did have a stretch where he struck out 7 guys in consecutive order, and he ended his outing by striking out 10 of the last 11 batters he faced. He's now up to 97, possibly 98 miles an hour with his fastball, mixing in a low to mid 80s slider with some pretty good cut, and a decent changeup that he kind of trickles in here and there, but. That fastball slider combination with that velocity and the movement on the slider, that's deadly in college baseball. And if he can, Lovelady said it, and it's totally true. The fastball is fine, but if he can land that slider for strikes as he did today, keep it on the corners, he's going to be really, really dominant in college baseball because you just don't see that type of combination, fastball slider combination with that kind of velocity at this level.
I think the staff is as deep as it's advertised, right? I mean, he told us he felt fairly good, 1-12 from an arm standpoint, Murph. You got to see most of them. Do you like what you saw? Again, I know it's Siena. I get it. It's Siena, but quality arms are still quality arms regardless of who you're facing, right?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think you don't come out of this series wondering about anybody. Well, okay, there is one person. Unfortunately, it's probably Nolan Lepkowski. You know, he is coming back from Tommy John surgery. He's about 12 months post Tommy John. They wanted to work him into a low leverage situation, and they did that in Game 2 of the doubleheader, where it was like a blowout, and he came in. He started out throwing 91, 92, which is about expected. However, he quickly dropped off to about 86, 87, and they quickly pulled him after 2 batters. I asked Lovelady after the game if there was something up with that, and he said that Lepkowski had been dealing with some sort of leg issue, and they didn't want to, maybe he had aggravated it. So that's something to watch going forward. Maybe he needs some time off. Chad Linsman really got hit around. The transfer from Nebraska got hit around a lot. 4 runs in an inning in the first game of the doubleheader. But I feel like, we talk about guys like Billy McKay, Jeffrey Higginson, David Litchfield, Jack Sinclair, like I said, Ryan Saltonstall made his debut after missing most of last year with an injury. He looked fine. It's a deep bullpen, even if there are some question marks with a couple of guys. UCF's got so many arms in that bullpen, and like we've said before many times, Greg Lovelady wants to win his games with the pitching, and specifically with the bullpen shortening games.
And you mentioned it. He's going to get Zach Hunsicker, they hope, later this week, right, to add to that.
Yes, right. And Hunsicker is a guy who can give you 2 innings. He can give you 5 innings. I mean, he's another versatile swingman reliever. It seems like they've got a handful of those guys. But, I mean, that's great in this game. They have 3 out guys. I mean, a guy like Jeffrey Higginson, is a 3-out guy. David Litchfield went 2 innings this weekend. I thought that was kind of interesting, but he's mostly going to be an 8th-inning guy. But most of their other relievers, the guys like Sinclair, even like Billy McKay, Hunsicker, those guys can give you multiple innings, and that is so valuable.
No, it really is. So a great start for baseball, 4-0, sweeping Siena, but it's obviously going to ranch up here. They got a midweek with Stetson Tuesday night at home before going on the road against nationally ranked Auburn, Murph, and that's one that's been circled. They played last year. Obviously, Auburn won 2 out of 3 here at John Juliano Park. They're a talented team. They made it to the College World Series last year. They have one of the best pitchers in the country in Burns, who's going to be possibly, as you mentioned, we talked about in the preview show, a top 10 pick. I think that'll be we'll learn a lot about this team and certainly the environment going into an Auburn, which is going to be, I'm sure, an SEC baseball stadium. It's going to be loud. It's going to be a good environment. I think a good test for this young team and see where they at and where they need to improve on, right?
Absolutely. And it should be noted, we talked about the Auburn matchup quite a bit in our baseball exclusive podcast back a couple weeks ago. So if you want to hear more about that, you can certainly go listen to that podcast. But now that we're in the season, I should note that Auburn did win or swept Illinois Chicago in a 4-game series this weekend. They kind of had some problems in the first game of the series. Tanner Burns actually got 3 runs in 5 innings against Illinois Chicago. That is the ace of their staff and one of the best pitchers in the nation. So be interesting to see what he does against the Knights next week. But he wasn't exactly unhittable on Friday, and then they were fine. They blew the doors off on the first game of Saturday, 18-1. They run ruled Illinois Chicago on Sunday, 14-0. This Auburn team is fantastic. Yes, UCF looked great for most of this weekend against Siena, but I mean, you can't go on more opposite ends of the spectrum than going from Siena to Auburn, which UCF will go within the span of a week.
Nah, it should be a lot of fun, and check out UCFKnights.com for all the details so you can follow that Auburn series. Maybe we'll get some SEC Network Plus online coverage of that. We'll see what happens with that. Coming up on this program, we're going to recap softball. What did we learn about them? They're 9-2, sweeping the Knights Classic. They also hosted number 1 Washington since we've spoken. Murph will ask me what my thoughts are on the softball team. Looking forward to see what Murph wants to know. But coming up, actually, we're going to go into men's basketball. Next, interesting times with UCF men's basketball. They had won 2 of the last 3 games, but certainly Thursday night against Wichita State was not pretty, and one of the people that was not happy about it was the head coach, Johnny Dawkins. We'll discuss that next. You're listening to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
And welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. I'm Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy. Jeff is still kind of recovering from an incredible weekend of his. Still on cloud 9 from calling UCF baseball's win over Siena on Saturday night. I mean, we're happy for him, right? I mean, we think he's taking it a little too far by celebrating the whole weekend, but hey, good effort to everybody's his own, right?
That's right. I mean, Jeffrey deserves it. It was a fantastic call on Saturday, but that's what you meant, Eric, when you introduced this podcast as a special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. It just meant there's no Jeff Sheridan. I guess that means it's special.
Or the fact that we're recording on a Sunday night. I mean,
that's very special.
Special. You always record. It's Sunday night. It's always special. It's a special meaning. Nothing that was special about UCF men's basketball's performance on Thursday night at home. Knights team losing to Wichita State 75-58. Was not pretty, Murph. You were there, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate because UCF had won 2 in a row prior to that game. They beat East Carolina last Thursday, back on February 6th, 68-64. And then on February 9th in the space game, beat Tulsa. Big win there. We talked about Tulsa being at the top of the league. UCF won that 83-75, and you're thinking, hey, things are looking up and up. And then Wichita State's clunker came in there. The Shockers dominated pretty much throughout. And really it was an upset Johnny Dawkins. I guess, Murph, the simple question is, what the heck happened?
Everything went wrong. And it's amazing. I watched that game against Wichita State, and I see a guy in Eric Stevenson who just gets loose, a fantastic shooter who gets hot at a bad time. Yes, UCF had some bad defense. Yes, UCF had some bad shot selection. But I sort of watched that game live, and I was like, hey, Stevenson's making some good shots. UCF could have played better. They didn't. And you almost felt like this was coming for Wichita State after they lost by 33 points in their previous game against Houston, and then they had a big team meeting. Well, Johnny Dawkins was not as kind. And talking to Johnny after the game, who never raises his voice. He never is a coach who's going to get to the podium and start ranting and raving and pounding the table and calling out guys by name. That's not his style. It never will be his style. If people are upset that he doesn't show enough fire publicly, sorry, I don't know what to tell you. Other than I have been told that Johnny, certainly in private moments with the team in the locker room and practice, is much more of a yeller than he shows in public. So there's that. But you could tell after that Wichita State game that he was irritated at the very least. And it wasn't, again, his tone of voice was fine, but just the forcefulness and the pointed words. It was just that the way he was talking, you could tell that he was really PO'd. And I asked him that. I said, you seem the most frustrated you've seen after any game this season. Is this the most frustrating game of the year? And he said, yes, it definitely is. And it was so many things that went wrong. They got out-rebounded by 17. And he basically called out the team's effort. It should be noted that UCF got out-rebounded by 17 at Wichita State just a few weeks ago. So it's something about the Shockers and their effort just outclassing the Knights. The shot selection for UCF, we know the last 2 games they won. They hit a bunch of threes, and Johnny seemed to think that this team just got infatuated with shooting threes again. They thought all of a sudden that all they would do is just spot up. And he wouldn't call out names, but I'll go ahead and do it now because it was pretty obvious what he was talking about. he's saying that, a three is a good shot for some guys, but not for all guys. Well, he's talking about, obviously, it's good for Matt Milan. It's good for Darren Green because that's their game. But when Brandon Mahan, who I guess, he is a shooter, but when Brandon Mahan comes down the floor and gets one pass and takes a shot, like 7 seconds into a shot clock, and does it twice in the span of like 2 minutes at the start of the game, that's not good. When Avery Diggs, who I believe coming in was 2 for 6 on the year from three, attempts a three from the top of the arc, right as UCF is on a 10-0 run, and ends up really halting that run in its tracks, that's bad. Ibrahim Famuke Dumia took, I believe, 1-3. That's not good. Tony Johnson had a layup chance that got blocked. However, UCF got the rebound twice and feed it back out to Tony, who was open for another three. But even though it's open, I think there's better a decision to really set up the offense rather than shoot 2 quick threes, and that's what Tony did. Tony just took both rebounds, called for them, shot threes, missed both. UCF was awful shooting from the perimeter in the game. And so after all this, after the bad shooting, the bad defense on Stevenson, the lack of effort on rebounding, at the very end, I believe it was Trey Stroko who asked, what do you think causes all this at this juncture? And Johnny pointed to the leaders on the team, not by name, but said the leadership. And goes, I didn't think at this point in the season we would be having problems with leadership on this team. I mean, for Johnny Dawkins, that is scorched earth talk. I mean, you just don't hear that. So it was a sobering night for UCF, which was feeling really good about itself after the last 2 games. But man, they crashed back to earth, and I can only imagine what their practice week has been like as they lead up to their next game.
Yeah, obviously I didn't see the game. I was in Clearwater covering softball. And, that was certainly I was listening on the way back from Clearwater. It certainly sounded good. Let me ask you this. I brought this up to you. I don't remember if we've discussed this on the air, but I know we've talked about it off the air, especially when you were in Wichita. I don't feel this is a good matchup for UCF. Wichita State has won every meeting since they've joined the conference, but more importantly, they've scored over 70 points in every meeting, including the first meeting up at Wichita, which you were at in person. I didn't have a good feeling. Wichita State was coming in, losers of 3 in a row, and Greg Marshall had kind of had how would you describe it, Murph? A come to Jesus meeting with his team?
I've described it as a come to Jesus meeting.
Right. So I knew.
Come to Jesus.
So, and Greg Marshall is one of the top coaches, so I knew they were going to come ready to play and prepared. So should we really be surprised by this? I didn't have a good feeling going into this game. I personally don't think it's a good matchup. Do you not agree with me that this is not a good matchup for UCF? And if so, what's your thoughts on that? The fact that really Wichita State is the one team in the league, even when UCF in all these years have had success offensively against UCF.
No, I'm not surprised at the result. I'm not surprised at the end result. I thought UCF was catching Wichita at a bad time, even though they lost 3. I just, I know it's all narrative street stuff, but when you've got a practice that ends with basically a team sitting together for 2 hours, cursing and yelling at each other, and players cursing at coaches, and basically airing grievances, and basically getting out all of the animosity that is held within the team, that's what Wichita State did. And that sort of clears the air. It becomes cathartic, and it sort of wakes everyone up. And so I'm not surprised that Wichita State came in here and won this game. I am surprised, however, at just so many facets in which UCF didn't perform well, and Johnny Dawkins' reaction to it all afterward. And again, I go back to it, calling out the leadership at the very end, saying it's disappointing. I think we'd have more of this, meaning leadership, at this time of the season. At this time of the season with 6 games remaining, I would think there'd be some guys stepping up with leadership in that regard and holding guys accountable out there for what we want to have happen. I mean, for Johnny Dawkins, again, he's basically, that is whoa stuff. It really is. It was caught me totally off guard, but it stands to this point that this team has a lack of leadership right now, and they need to figure that out fast if they want to do anything over the rest of the season. And I think the only way you can really work that out is by being honest with the guys on the team, sitting down and really hammering out, what's expected of everybody. And if someone's got problems with someone, you got to talk about it. Because I feel like this team right now, or at least on that game against Wichita State, it was very disconnected. Guys were doing things that were totally out of the ordinary of what UCF wants to do. So there's a disconnect somewhere, and something needs to be straightened out. So we'll see how they react on Wednesday against Cincinnati. We will be able to talk to them. We will be able to talk to Johnny and players on Tuesday. So I'll ask to see how the week has gone. But I'm certainly interested to see how they respond from this.
What's wild about this, Murph, is this takes place, 4 days after arguably one of their better performances and one of their best wins of the year when they beat Tulsa, who was playing well, and beat them at home, winning 83-75. You could argue it wasn't even that close. UCF missed some free throws, kind of let Tulsa back in. How do you kind of digest that? How the difference is in a matter of 4 days, the Sunday game, Tulsa, UCF playing well, winning 83-75. Darren Green was on fire, had a phenomenal game. The young freshman, and you're feeling good about things, about the turnaround here in the second half of the year. I mean, Green scored a career-high 26 points in that game. And then 3-4 days follow it up with that performance against Wichita State. It's just kind of curious, sir, isn't it?
It's very curious. It kind of smells like a team that felt like they had it figured out, after 2 wins. And again, this team, most of it is still young, but when things like this go wrong, that's when you need your upperclassmen to stand up. And for this team, that's Matt Milon, that's Dejon Ingram, that's Colin Smith. They need to say something now. And I will say, Matt Milon in the post-game press conference almost outwardly apologized in the press conference, saying it's just a really poor showing by us. The fans deserve better. The people that came before us deserve better. I mean,
wow.
They know not only did they miss an opportunity to beat a good team at home, extend their winning streak. Yeah, they lost the game, but not only did they lose it, they've just played poorly in every aspect. So maybe this is a wake-up call. I don't know, but certainly the way they played, it almost seemed like they were getting too comfortable. They thought they were going to just come in here and do what they had done, which is shoot and make a lot of threes the last 2 games, which they did against DCU and Tulsa. But that's not this team's strength. I mean, there's a reason why they're still shooting 31% as a team from deep. It's because they're not great at shooting threes. A couple of guys are. Darren Green's been good. Matt Milon's been better of late again. But this team should not be shooting a ton of threes. Once again, it did, and it cost them. And I will say, you could see it in the playing time, though. You could see it with the way that Brandon Mahan, after he shot those 2 really quick, ill-advised threes early in the game, he played 90 seconds after halftime. I mean, Avery Diggs didn't play much. Doumbia didn't play much. I think that's a call to those guys saying, look, you got to play to your strengths. You can't just follow what we did in the last game and think that's going to carry over and all of a sudden think you're a three-point shooter too. I mean, to think that Avery Diggs is shooting a 3, it just can't happen.
No. Now, they had an injury in the game, right? Cesar DeJesus had to leave the game, right? Tell us what happened there for those that may have missed that.
Right, so Cesar got hit in the eye in that game and was feeling kind of blurry, had some blurry vision. I don't know if he was feeling a little dizzy, but basically Johnny just said they didn't want to take any risks with that. They want to be safe with him, so he sat out the rest of the game in the second half. I don't know what his status is. Certainly we will mention that when we talk to Johnny on Tuesday. Maybe I know Johnny has a radio interview on Monday. Maybe that'll be a topic that is discussed.
Radio show, the coaches show, yeah.
The coaches show with Mark Daniels. But if not, we'll figure it out by Tuesday and see where Caesar's at. But that's what happened to him. It didn't sound in the moment. It didn't sound as if it was a serious injury.
UCF will go on the road Wednesday night to take on first place Cincinnati. Yes, I said it. First place Cincinnati, Murph. A team that we were maybe laughing a little bit at during the non-conference year for some of their perplexing performances this season. But all of a sudden, they are on top of the league. They're 10-3. Now, they had to survive East Carolina winning in overtime on Sunday to preserve that first place. But they're 10-3, and a team under first-year head coach John Brannon And this has been pretty remarkable. And you could make the argument, Murph, that we saw Cincinnati start to turn it around when they came to Orlando earlier this year and won the game. They dominated Tulsa the game prior to the UCF game, where I think they won by 40-some points. And then,
they won by 21.
21, okay. And then they come and beat UCF by 14 on January 11th. And they've taken off from that standpoint. What's been your thoughts on the Bearcats, who now have played themselves into a chance to win the conference championship and get back to the NCAA tournament, despite some of the questionable losses, in particular losing to Colgate at home in one of the more laughable losses where they fouled with, we've talked about it ad nauseum about. But here they are. They lost to Valparaiso in the Virgin Islands, but right now they're on top of the league.
No, and I should correct myself. They lost by 31, not 21. I can't add. It's been a long day, a long weekend. I apologize. But that was back in January. Yeah, I mean, since January 16th, they've gone 7-1. I mean, it's just a team that I think is playing up to its talent now. We knew when they were struggling early in the year, we were laughing at it for losing to Bowling Green and the loss to Colgate and all that stuff. We knew that what was perplexing is that this team should not be this bad. I mean, even with a new coach, they still had the player of the year in Jaron Cumberland. They still had that really tough mindset. But I think you're seeing them play better defensively. I will mention, though, interesting, I don't know if this comes back to haunt them later in the year. They've played 3 consecutive overtime games. They lost to UConn on the road back in February 72-71 in overtime. Then the last 2 games, both wins against Memphis and ECU. Both those were in overtime as well. I wonder if some of that comes back to haunt them late in the year. They still have another game with Houston. They have another game with Wichita State that maybe tires their legs out a little bit. But that's just me sort of speculating. Look, they're a very good team. We know they're a good defensive team. They've been a much better offensive team this year under Coach Brandon. And so we'll see what UCF does in that building. UCF played Cincinnati really well last year in that building, but of course, what does that mean now, considering that basically no one on that team is still here? But we'll see. I'm more interested, even if UCF loses that game against Cincinnati, I'm just more interested to see what kind of energy they come out with, what their play is like, how connected they are as a team, things they didn't have against Wichita State.
They're 10-3, 17-8 overall. Cincinnati tied for first with Houston, who lost at SMU over the weekend. Tulsa is right there at 9-3 overall, 17-8. SMU 8-4 in conference. Wichita State 7-5, and then Memphis, Merv, who has collapsed stunningly, 6-6 in the league. They lose at UConn over the weekend here on Sunday. UConn, Dan Hurley is starting to turn things around over there. They're now quietly 5-7, 14-11 overall. UCF stands at 4-8, tied with South Florida currently, with East Carolina at 4-9, and then Tulane at 2-11. Murph, I know you're going to Fort Worth. That's where the men's conference championship is going to be held, and maybe it's a fitting place because there's a lot of questions. We don't know what to expect from the building at Fort Worth, and this might be maybe the most unpredictable conference tournament in the American basketball short history, and maybe one of the most unpredictable ones throughout the entire country. Because do you make any sense of any of this?
No one can, nor should you try. We've learned basically every night that the AAC is in action that something weird is going to happen. I mean, I know Cincinnati survived, and that's great, but they were down by, I believe, 7 at home to Memphis with about 3 minutes remaining, and then they really should have lost today to ECU. I mean, they win, you give them credit, but they should have lost these games. So even while we're singing their praises, they are not without fault. And certainly, Memphis, they've lost 5 of 7. It's really, really bad right now. They've got more injuries with DJ Jeffries being out for the year, so that's too bad. Tulsa, do you believe in them? I don't think I do. I know they're a hard-nosed team, but I don't think there's anything there's not a guy on that team where you say offensively they're going to go win me a game. And I think in tournament basketball you need that. They don't have someone like that. I think Houston's still the best team, a really well-coached team, obviously, with Kelvin Sampson. They have a bunch of good players, Quentin Grimes, Nate Hinton. But like I said, in this conference, you just never know. So if we think we're going to see chalk next month in Dickies Arena, that's probably not a good bet.
If I said this following, I'm curious your reaction to this following statement. If I think up to 6 teams in the league can win the conference tournament in Fort Worth, your response is what?
I think we could have more than that.
Whoa!
If Connecticut gets, okay. So let's just do this right now.
Yeah.
We can agree that the 5 that we will add in there or put in there is Houston, Cincinnati, Tulsa, SMU, Wichita State.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then would your 6th team be Memphis or Connecticut?
I put Memphis just because they still have that talent. If they could just put it together, right? They're capable. Play at the highest level for a week and win the tournament. So, yes, I include Memphis as my 6th team, despite the issues that you have brought up. They are still talented enough. Heck, I remember a couple years ago in Orlando when they were decimated and Josh Pastner was the head coach and they made a run to the final. So, yes, I include Memphis on that, even though it doesn't look pretty at all right now.
No, and I'll say that I think I might believe more in Connecticut than Memphis, just because I don't trust Memphis anywhere away from home right now, or really anywhere right now. Whereas Connecticut has guards that can win games, and in college basketball, there's nothing more important than guards. I mean, really, and certainly in tournament basketball, that is doubly true. So they got guys like Christian Vital and Alterique Gilbert who can win games in the backcourt, and I think that's important. So actually, I would give Connecticut a better chance than Memphis, without maybe saying that Memphis it's impossible that they can win it. Because certainly, Precious Achiuwa could take over and win them 4 games in 4 days. So if you set the line at 6. I feel comfortable with that, but I would actually maybe lean closer to 7 because at least Memphis might still have a chance, and we should not count out Connecticut because of their guard play.
That's unbelievable. UCF currently tied for 9th right now. And, of course, remember, what is it, Murph? The top 4 get a bye into the quarterfinals?
That's correct.
The top 4. So right now you would have UCF kind of in an 8-9 situation. In fact, it could be UCF-USF in Fort Worth. Potentially. Again, it's still a lot of basketball to go, so we're not going to try to project standings. But I think you're in for a wild ride in Fort Worth, Murph. It could be pretty crazy up there in Fort Worth. One tournament we know, conference tournament we know where UConn has got, I think, a good chance to win is the women's version. I like their chances on that one. I'm going to go on a limb and say there's not going to be 6 teams that have a shot to win the women's basketball tournament. Some would argue there's only 1. But one of the teams that's trying to move up in the standings is the Knights women's team, who came in off a defensive slugfest, beating Cincinnati on Saturday at home 49-42. Not the most artistic basketball game. Maybe setting the tone for what the men are going to bring on Wednesday, because it's not like UCF, Cincinnati, and the men's side have played artistic games either over the years. But a big win for Coach Abe and the Knights. They were down 11-4, I think, after the first quarter, down 20-15 at half, but come back and win it. And as a result, Murph, obviously UConn running away with the women's the league once again. But you have Cincinnati, UCF, and USF all tied at 7-4 in the league, which sets up a huge showdown on Wednesday night at Addition Financial Arena, with UCF hosting USF, the War and I-4. Knights won in Tampa earlier this year, trying to go for the sweep, which could be significant from tie-breaking purposes. Also significant because UCF's got to go to UConn next weekend. And if you're UCF, if you're USF, and you're Cincinnati, what you're trying to do is trying to get to the 2 spot or the 3 spot so you can avoid Connecticut until the final of the American Conference Championship game at the Mohican up there in Connecticut. Neither one of us watched it, but that's a big win. This is a big stretch here for Coach Abe and the Knights as they make a push, if not for the NCAA tournament, at least try to make a push for the WNIT and get back in the postseason.
And I think what's misleading about this game, well, not this game, but the UConn. So UConn played USF today.
Yeah.
And so UConn won by, was it 19? They won by 20, 67-47. People should know that, they wiped the floor with them. No, they didn't. USF was winning that game at halftime. I mean, USF was outplaying them badly in the first half. They had more offensive rebounds than UConn in the first half. Then the fourth quarter happened, and UConn outscored them 21-6. I'm saying this because USF is is competing with UConn like that, similar to how UCF competed with UConn not that long ago, early this season. So, it's a fantastic game. You said there's a lot riding on the line. That's certainly true. And they're facing a team in USF that, at least for 3 quarters, looked like they could knock off one of the best programs of all time.
It is, and Jose Fernandez has done a great job at South Florida, and so I'm not surprised. And, this is not the most dominant UConn team. I think that's been well established on them, that they're not the dynamic teams of the years past when they were winning national titles and Final Fours and things like that. That game was played in Tampa, by the way. I will note that. South Florida still has to go to Connecticut later in the year. So does UCF this week. Keep that in mind. But here's another thing about the significance of this game on Wednesday night. Going into this weekend, UCF quietly here, Murph, RPI up to 44 on the women's RPI. 44 in that RPI. South Florida is 63. Those are the second and third best RPIs in the American. Obviously, UConn number 1 at 7, with Temple way back at 79. I mean, right now, if you're women's basketball, you're just kicking yourself, Murph, because of that loss at Temple late and at Tulane. That might haunt you. That might cost you the NCAA tournament, depending on how this plays out. But I really do think there's a chance the loser of UCF-USF on Wednesday night may be knocked out as far as having a chance to make the NCAA tournament and making the American a 2-bid league. I don't see a scenario where the league gets 3 bids this year. But that's how significant I think this game is, not to mention, obviously, the rivalry and the points with the War and I-4 regardless.
No, and another thing about what makes this win so important, if you win this game, obviously it puts you in the driver's seat there, and then you assume the loss at UConn, but the rest of the regular season schedule is not that challenging. They have the rematch against Temple, but that's at home. They have Memphis, and they have Wichita State. I mean, these are pretty mediocre teams. And like you said, UConn not only faces UCF and USF again, UConn also faces Cincinnati and Tulane again. Tulane at 7-5. So all of those teams are probably going to suffer, are going to drop a game at some point. It's about how you finish against the other teams. And for UCF, really the game of the season is the next one. And I don't mean that like a cliche. If you win and beat USF, then you can kind of throw the game against Connecticut away, because everyone else is going to lose to Connecticut too,
right,
and focus on your last 3 games, which are not at least challenging on paper.
Right, and if you can get that 2 seed, that's going to look good too on the resume in the bubble, and then make a run to the American final and play UConn tough, that might squeak you into the tournament. We'll see. Lots of basketball between now and then, but it all begins Wednesday night, UCF, USF, 7 o'clock on ESPN 3. Despina Barton will be calling that game with former Tennessee head coach Holly Warwick will be calling that. And then the game will also be on the audio. You can listen to the audio broadcast on UCF Knights TV 1 with this guy's voice that you're hearing right now. How about that for a bad plug? Speaking of a plug, coming up, UCF softball. What did we learn from the Knights' first 11 games? It's the second best start in program history. Can it maintain that and much more as we wrap up this special edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast? And welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Eric Lopez alongside Brian Murphy. Jeff Sheridan off on this episode, enjoying the festivities, Valentine's weekend, and Daytona 500 being postponed, and calling UCF baseball wins. So it's all it's just
enjoying the Daytona 500 being postponed.
That's right. Who doesn't? Let's get into other stuff. UCF softball now playing 9-2. Second best start program history. Only the 2015 Knights that started 10-1 was better, and they ended up going 50-9. The Knights swept through the Knights Classic this weekend, beating Iowa State twice, beating them on Friday night 4-3 in 9 innings, run rolling them on Saturday 9-1. They beat Villanova on Saturday 7-3, and then they run rolled Florida Atlantic with a 10-0 win in 5 innings. To improve the 9-2. That's all bouncing back after the tough loss to number 1 ranked Washington on Wednesday night, 12-3 in that game. Other notes of this game of the weekend: Alea White picked up her 70th career win on Friday night in relief in that Iowa State game, becoming the 4th Knight to get to the 70-win milestone, as she now joins Mackenzie Audis, Allison Kime, and Shelby Turnier in that mark. And then on Sunday, she picked up her 71st career win, tying her for third all-time with Allison Kime in that mark. Mackenzie Audis second with 78, Shelby Turnier from 80. We'll hear from Alea White in a little bit, Murph, but I'm excited. I'm excited, Murph. It's a good start. Some good offense. Georgia Blair, a junior from Australia, has 4 home runs already this season in the first 11 games, hit 3 this weekend. The Knights as a team have hit 10 home runs at 16 games. So a good start for Coach Ball-Malone and the Knights here in the early season going. I know you haven't been able to follow as closely because you were next door at baseball, but I know you watched a little bit of Washington, and you're kind of curious about this team yourself. You've got some questions.
Well, certainly. I mean, we know how much of a difficulty this team had scoring runs last year. You laid it out brilliantly throughout the season about how no matter what the pitching would do, they just couldn't score runs. And then this year, they've already had 5 games with at least 8 runs scored. I believe they only had 2 such games with 9 runs or more after March 1st of last year. So they're showing more offensive potential. You mentioned Georgia Blair. Who else is really sort of showing up and showing out in this early season portion?
Well, it's such a deep team. And when we did the softball preview a couple of weeks ago, Coach Ball-Malone talked about the depth and going to the bench. And she's using that big time. You look at a kid like Juliana Wilson, a freshman out of California, had a home run and 4 RBIs off the bench in the victory over Iowa State on Saturday night. She has power. Shannon Doherty, a freshman out of Coral Springs, Florida, who's won 4 state championships, has been solid as a pinch hitter and as a solid starter in the middle of the lineup, driving in runs. Jada Cody, a third baseman, a freshman, starting at third. You know, we talked about, Murph, all the new faces in baseball. Softball has 12 new faces themselves. So you just wondered how that would blend in overall with 25, 26 players on the roster. You've got, Cody's new at third base. You got Georgia Blair, who's new, who's playing shortstop. Justine Molina, the transfer out of Boise State at second base. She's new. She's got 13 ribbies already this year. So it's coming from a lot of different places. And Coach Ball-Malone wants to have a diverse offense where they don't depend on one thing. They can give you a little bit of a mixture, and we've seen that so far offensively with this team. And I think that's kind of the thing that's been exciting to see is all the different pieces that have stepped up offensively. Carissa Ornelas, I asked the big question going in, who's going to be the catcher in the production you lose from a Cassidy Brewer. She's been tremendous with that, offensively and catching behind defensively there. So I think that's the exciting thing, too. It's a lot of young faces, new faces, but they're young, and they've been producing at a very good clip here so far in the first 11 games. That was fantastic stats, by the way, Murph. I didn't even know that. It blew me away. That's pretty good. I didn't even know that. That tells you, though, it's a good sign that the offense, at least, and I know it's early, looks definitely better and improved from last year.
No, they're certainly off to a good start. And you mentioned Alea White reaching her 70th victory milestone and getting her 71st this weekend as well. I mean, she's off to another fantastic start with a 2.15 ERA, 34 strikeouts in 29 innings. What have you just seen from her in this season, maybe contrasting her from last year where she was so dominant as well? What have you seen from Alea?
Well, I think I've seen someone who has good command and very poised and knows that she doesn't have to carry the load. You've got a Brianna Vasquez who's back in her sophomore year, who threw a gem and got the win against Iowa State on Saturday night. You've got G. Mancha, a transfer from Boise State. And again, Mancha and Molina both played for Coach Ball-Malone when she was the head coach at Boise State. They come over via the transfer, and G has been in relief and has started. So you got 3 strong starters now, Murph, all of a sudden. So if you're Alea White, you don't have to carry the load like she's had to for the majority of her career, where she looked over her shoulder and it's like, ooh, I better be ready every game to pitch. That's not necessarily the case anymore, and I think she feels confident about the offense that she has and things like that. In fact, I talked to Alea White on Sunday following the win against FAU, where she picked up her 71st win, and she addressed your question, Murph, about how she's feeling it with not only the pitching staff she's got, but the offense that she has behind her, and as well as reaching that milestone in the 70-win club in 71, joining Ty and Allison Kime for third. Here's my chat with Alea White following UCF's win over FAU. Well, Alea, perfect weekend for the team overall, going undefeated this weekend. Just talk about overall this weekend, very good, deep pitching and great offense.
Yeah, I think this weekend we definitely did what we stuck to our plan, and we're very deep pitching wise and hitting and actually everywhere. And we really just stuck to our plan and did our thing.
Talk about this offense scoring 7 runs in the third inning. You got to wait for a while. It's a good problem to have all that runs, but you got to stay kind of in that rhythm. Talk about how you stayed in that rhythm and shut the door after the big inning.
I love when our offense gets 7 runs and I have to, get a little antsy in the dugout. But I definitely every time we have 2 outs, I come in the bullpen and just do some spins just to keep my head in the game and my rhythm going, and while our offense is just doing their work.
Doing their thing. Talk about the staff. You, G, pitching, getting wins, as well as Bree getting the win over Saturday as well. Even Madison Davis coming in relief. This deep staff, the deepest you've had since you've been here, contributing all as a team here.
Correct. This is the deepest staff that I've had since I've been here. And I think we all give very different looks and we're unique in our own way. And I think it's great that we all have a different energy as well. They definitely keep me on my toes and keep me calm, and I think that we're going to be very successful the rest of the year.
Does seeing the offense contributing like they are this year, does that give the pitchers to have even more confidence that, hey, we're going to get runs so we can even be more aggressive on the pitching wise?
Yeah, having the offense that we do is absolutely amazing. It really allows us to stay calm and let our pitches work and let our defense work behind us.
For you personally, this is your 71st career win. That ties you for 3rd all time with the Hall of Famer Allison Kime. Just talk about that, 71 wins, getting that 70 win mark this weekend, a 4th pitcher ever to do it.
I'm just super honored and thankful to be a part, along with Allison Kime and Shelby and McKenzie, and can't wait to see what the rest of the season brings.
Now you head out to Tampa. What do you take from this weekend moving forward to next weekend now as you go on the road for the first time this year?
For the first time on the road, I think we're ready and we're super excited, and we're just got to stick to ourselves and keep believing in ourselves and doing what we know how to do and sticking to our plan each game.
And that was Alea White from Sunday, post-game following the FAU win. So you heard it right there, Murph, the confidence. You could just sense it. She feels good about the staff she has around her and the offense now producing. All of a sudden, the pitchers feel confident that, hey, we don't have to be perfect and try to win a 1-0 game. We know that our offense can deliver, and that gives us a little bit more, be more aggressive and confident and attack hitters more.
Right, and it must be so comfortable, like you said, to know that you don't have to put everything on your shoulders. However, obviously there was one start for Alea that didn't go great. There's no shame in this, though. I mean, it's the number 1 team in the nation. Last week they played Washington, the Huskies, top ranked, right here at the UCF softball complex, and although the score looked lopsided, Washington won that game 12-3. Well, they scored 5 runs off Alea in the 2nd inning, and they scored 7 runs in the 7th inning. But really, it was a 5-3 game going into that 7th inning. What did you see from the Knights at that point, was the best team in the country?
The thing that jumped out at me that you mentioned, the 5 runs in the 2nd inning, Morgan Flores, who's arguably the best catcher in college softball, with the 3-run homer off Alea. She just didn't have her best stuff there. But they fought back in the game, and then offensively, goes back to the offense and the improvement. Juliana Wilson hit a 2-run homer off the palm tree in the scoreboard off the 2-time All-American Gabby Plain, who's going to be pitching for the Australian national team more than likely this summer in Tokyo. And they got back within 5-3 and had some chances to even add to that. So I like the fact that the offense had success against someone like Gabby Plain, who's one of the top pitchers in the country. And then, things got out of hand in the 7th inning. A couple plays weren't made, and when you do that against a team like Washington, it's going to get a little out of control, and that's what happened. And Washington scored some runs. G. Mancha kind of ran out of gas, who came in relief, did some good things there. So it's a little misleading of a score. It is what it is, but it was really just 2 innings, and I think that will be a positive for them moving forward, Murph, because as we know, look, the schedule is only going to get harder. Now, they're off to a good start. They've got 2 wins over Indiana out of the Big Ten, who I think is too young pitching-wise. Iowa State, they got a couple wins against the Big 12. They got win against Duke. So they've got that's a good start, but we still have they're far from the meat of the order of the schedule. And it's going to start next weekend in Tampa when they play Tennessee, who's nationally ranked. They're also going to play FIU. That's not as big of a deal. But then they go to Florida State in Tallahassee. Lonnie Alameda and the Noles are a top 10 team. You just saw them, actually, as we were talking. They just lost a heartbreaker to UCLA up in Clearwater. But they're a very talented ball club. And then really, the big turning point will be in March when the UCF goes on the West Coast trip, and they're going to face UCLA, who you got to see, Murph, there on television there Sunday night where they beat Florida State. They're going to be the number 1 ranked team in the country this week. It might be the number 1 ranked team for a while going into that weekend when UCF goes up there in California and plays UCLA. They got to play Michigan, who's the Big Ten champs. They got to play Minnesota. We documented that in our softball preview podcast, which you can listen to in our archives. So I still think we're going to learn more about this team really at that point. But I will say, I think they'll learn that Washington game will help them be prepared for those games later on moving forward. And I do think they'll play with more confidence because they know they feel good about their offense. They feel they have the pitching staff. They're going to be deep enough. And I do think this team has improved from last year and will be a contender in the American. I'm just curious about how they handle the California trip and then going to Ole Miss. That'll tell us a lot about the 2020 Knights.
Questions asked, questions answered. I mean, obviously, who else would I turn to for softball knowledge?
That's correct. That's myself here. Let's hear my conversation with Coach Ball-Malone, Coach Bear, as they call her, and her thoughts from this weekend and moving forward to Tampa when they take on Tennessee. Well, Coach, you wrap up a perfect weekend with the win over FAU, go undefeated in the Knights Classic. Just talk about coming out Sunday aggressive and taking care of business.
Yeah, I think we got our momentum from the first game on Friday rolling into today. Started feeling our bats more and played good defense, pitching. So it's the complete game.
Georgia Blair, another home run for her, 3 this weekend, and she's hit them to all sides of the field. Tremendous power. Just talk about her and what a talent, not to mention a great defensive play on Friday night to help win the game against Iowa State.
Oh, that was a fun one. Georgia's she's an experienced player, a mature player. She makes at-bat adjustments, in-game adjustments, and she studies the game. So I've said it before, I feel like she's another coach on the team, and so she just has had the ability to play and the opportunity to play with so many great athletes and against so many great athletes. So she's definitely been a student of the game, and it's paying off.
You called Molly Rainey's number as she delivers a 2-run homer, but just on your bench as a whole, Jules Wilson Saturday night with a homer and 4 RBIs off the bench. Your bench is becoming a weapon offensively, which is what you want. I know part of your philosophy.
Oh, absolutely. Our goal is that one pitcher is not going to beat the entire lineup, and having all those bats ready gives us a great opportunity. I mean, you don't know what the starting lineup is going to be that day. It's just matchups and who's on fire at that time, and to have those options off the bench is just awesome.
Your pitching depth was kind of showcased this weekend. Brianna with a great win on Saturday against Iowa State. G coming in relief and starting this week and getting wins, and then Alea closing things down as a reliever and starting on Sunday. Talk about the depth of your staff.
Yeah, well, I think the most important thing is they realize that they're a team within a team. And so they're playing for each other, pitching for each other, and understanding that we don't have to overpower people. We just can play our game and pitch our game. And so it's going to be fun when they start to really get into, I still don't think we've seen any of their best yet, but I think we've seen some great performances.
Do you feel the pitching staff will also kind of be even more confident knowing what the offense is producing, not knowing that they have to be perfect?
Yeah, no, I think it's always fun to be able to pitch loose and confident and know that we can be aggressive in some situations and go after some hitters and know that our lineup's got us.
You're going on the road. First weekend now, Tampa. Next weekend, Tennessee and FIU. Just talk to the approach there now, going on the road away from the complex here, the first time this year.
Yeah, well, it'll be good. We actually took a road trip in the fall, and we do that so it's not the first trip as a group. But typically on the road, we get them together. They're more focused. They're doing homework. They're staying together, and we're making sure they're going to sleep. And so, and they're eating good. So we're just going to continue to keep playing our game. The other opponent doesn't have a face or a name on the jersey. It's playing our best selves every day.
That was Coach Bear. My conversation with her following the win against FAU on Sunday. Feeling good about the offense, the depth, Georgia Blair, and the pitching staff coming together as they'll get set to take on Tennessee. Now, I failed to mention this in the opening segment. We talked baseball earlier, Murph. Shame on me. But I'm going to bring it back and save it because Joe Girardi, first of all, was in Clearwater on Saturday supporting Northwestern softball because he is a Northwestern grad on Saturday. The Wildcats are a top 25 team. But then on Friday, as we learned, Murph, was at John Juliano Park, of all places, for the UCF opener.
Yeah, he drove up from Clearwater. He's just the manager of the Phillies right now, and their spring training home is in Clearwater. He drove up Friday and came to see some UCF baseball, mostly because he is close friends with the family of Matthew Archer, UCF's third baseman. Matt's dad is a longtime pro baseball scout, so that's how they know each other through baseball. And so Joe was up here to talk to Matt, or talk to really just to see Matt. He also talked with Coach Lovelady before the game on Friday. Coach Lovelady said it was nice to have him around, and also hope that Joe wasn't too critical of anything he did managerially during the game. Kind of quipped about that. But hey, it's not every time that you see a 4-time World Series champion in John Juliano Park, I guess.
That's pretty wild. I mean, doesn't he have better things to do? I mean, he is the Philadelphia Phillies manager, yet he's just traveling all over the place. I mean, that's pretty wild. I mean, if you would have run into him at John Juliano Park, what would have been your first question to him?
My question would have been the same question that he's going to get about 16 times this week in Phillies camp, which is, how do you feel about that 2017 ALCS now?
Yeah. Would you still be the manager if the Houston Astros weren't caught cheating there? Okay. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. Pretty cool story, though, background story there with Joe Girardi. Let's go over some other UCF sports before we wrap this up. UCF women's tennis continues to be on a roll. They beat UC Santa Barbara 4-1 over the weekend at the USTA National Campus, and they beat Nebraska 4-0. They are rolling, folks. They've won 4 in a row. They beat Texas A&M, who's in the top 20 last weekend. That women's tennis program it's a top 15, top 20 program, continues to roll. A pretty remarkable story what they've done over there for them as they continue to be on fire. Then men's tennis played over the they have time off, actually. They played last Sunday, beat Illinois, won at Illinois 4-3. They won't play again. This is wild. They don't play again until February 29th against Florida Atlantic. But they're ranked as well. Despite a tough schedule and 4-3 record, they are playing very well. I mean, this is a busy time, Murph. We got all sports going on here. Tennis, golf is now underway. I mean, softball, baseball, basketball still got some games to go on. I mean, it's the springtime. I mean, who's to say? I mean, there's a ton of stuff going on.
Track and field is going.
That got started. Oh, yes, they got started. That's a great point, Murph. Look at you bringing the track into the equation. They did get started this weekend. Let's see how they did. They were up and on the road. I know that. So that's
They were up in Clemson, I believe. Yeah, they're up in Clemson, South Carolina.
Wow. Yeah, they did, and they closed it out with really some great individual performances there. So they're starting out the year there. So it's a lot of time. We were going to be covering this all year. Before you know it, you got golf, tennis. Those are programs that are expected to win championships, and then rowing will get going. So it's funny. Some people think it's a slow time of year because there's no football, and then of course spring practice will get going probably sooner than later. But there's so many sports. There's more sports going on in the spring now than there usually is in the fall, which makes it even, I think, a more busier time.
Yeah, and let's close with this, Eric.
Yes.
UCF football. We have to mention it in this show. UCF football. We should have some news. You're listening to this probably on Monday morning. I hope, Jeffrey, if you get this up in time, that the schedule for UCF football's 2020 season should be released. So I hear either Monday or Tuesday of this week. So we will know basically when. And where?
Are you teasing? Are you going to tease a Murph bomb here? Are you teasing a Murph bomb this week?
No. Okay. I am teasing a release by the AAC. I am teasing a release by the American Athletic Conference, which should come out, either Monday or Tuesday of this week. So we should know some game times and certainly dates and locations. So that'll be on the horizon as well. So we've got that to worry about, and then. Spring football is not too far away. Actually, it'll be starting later this month. We don't exactly have a timetable for how long it'll go, or for us, that's important, the availabilities. But we have heard that it will be starting on February 28th. So, I mean, spring football is this month.
Very good, very good. It's crazy. It's going to get even crazier. Wild times going on there. Murph. All right, Murph, tell the audience what you got, where you're working on. I know you've got some family business to take care of this week, so we won't hear from you later this week, but that doesn't mean you're going to stop working. So what do you got going on?
No, I'll be around. I certainly do hope to make it out to the baseball game on Tuesday night versus Stetson. That game's at 6 at John Yona Park. It kind of depends on everything else in my life, how that goes. But before that, I'll be talking to Johnny Dawkins Tuesday early afternoon about the week that's been for the team, see if there's anything coming out of that. And then I'll be back this weekend to go to the Tulane game. UCF men's basketball facing Tulane on Saturday. Between then and now, I will hope to get an article up soon before the next game on Wednesday for basketball about how UCF basketball needs to sort of copy Wichita State and have its own come to Jesus meeting now. And maybe this is something that won't come out this week, but pretty shortly I will have something on Joe Sheridan, a longer piece about his journey over the last almost 2 years from basically thinking he was not a good pitcher anymore, who couldn't find the strike zone, to then going under surgery, and now he's back. So I'll have a piece on that in short order.
Yeah, that's going to be really good stuff, Joe. Really happy for Joe there. Indeed. By the way, I will ask this question since it was asked on social media while we were recording this. I know that this might surprise you, Murph. It's Sam Unger with a question. It's not a baseball question. Not a baseball question.
Oh, my God.
Unger to Unger asking, can Alea White break the wins record this year? The answer is yes. I hope if she's healthy, more than likely she will. She's at 71 wins. Shelby Turnier is at 80. Mackenzie Audis is at 78. Allison Kime is at 71. She would be on pace to break it. Won't be as easy maybe as you would think because we have so much depth, so it's a good problem to have. So I'm going to answer your question now since you asked the question. But Murph, I may have stolen him from you. He's a softball guy now. I mean, he's still following baseball, but he's a softball baseball. This is going to be one of his favorite podcast episodes, I think, because of the softball baseball talk.
Certainly, Sam is still checking in. Making sure that Joe Sheridan has good velocity. I saw that today, to which I said it's fine, and he's still tuning in. I know, Sam. I know you're around. You're never that far away from UCF baseball.
Well, it's a lot easier now. You got the UCF Knights softball baseball on for free. It's on Twitch, so it's easier for guys like Sam to follow it.
It's so much better, too. For those who haven't watched a UCF softball or baseball game yet on Twitch, I mean, it's so much better. I never would listen to or watch a game on the UCF Knights TV last year, and I'm now listening into the broadcast of every baseball game because it's so easy to it's so accessible, and the stream is pretty consistent. We did have an issue on Friday where I believe one of the servers died during one of the baseball games, which caused the stream to drop out for a couple innings, but it was great all weekend long. I mean, either if you're watching UCF Knights 1 or 2, both streams were really, really quality, so I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's been really they do a great job. The video people do a great job. The graphics are fantastic. It's just awesome work there by a lot of people behind the scenes. There are too many to mention here, but certainly I've been fortunate to do work with Eric softball. We had over 1,000 people tuned in for the Washington game on Wednesday. It was a monster number there. But it was cool to have baseball and softball. Like, I spent most of the weekend while I was at softball having the baseball game on, and that was pretty fun. Although I did mute Jeff when he was on. Not because any negative, I hear him enough, doing this podcast. I mean, for me, anyway. You know what I mean? I'm sure
True,
I got to tell you.
That's what makes this podcast special. There's no Jeff. How about the fact, Eric, that we are maybe like an hour and 45 minutes into taping? If this was a Jeff podcast, this was easily a 2.5-hour show. We have picked the pace up on this.
I like to go up tempo. And push it, and it'll be good. So I like to go speed and not to drag it on there, and we just flow with it, baby. We'll flow with it. So we may do another podcast later this week. It might be me and Jeff. We'll see. We'll see how the week develops. Murph teasing maybe some big news. We'll see. Hey, you never know. I mean, football schedule, baby. Hey, we got to talk about that and much more. Follow us again. Murph, you mentioned where you could follow him. You could follow us at UCF_Banneret. You could follow me at Eric Lopez Elo. Feel free to ask questions throughout the week on social media. And in fact, you have questions, especially if you have questions for Murph, we'll ask him on the air, on the podcast. If you have questions for me, we'll address that on the podcast. So a lot of fun there. It's here. But it's exciting. The baseball season's underway, softball going on. And so we figured we'd do this special podcast to kind of recap all of that because we haven't done one of these in about a little while, other than the baseball preview show. So, Murph, this was fun. This was enjoyable. I feel this was a very high-quality WrestleMania quality show.
This was a great show, and I look forward to Jeffrey listening to this now as he's editing it and realizing how much we just trashed him.
We buried him like wrestlers bury each other in promos. It's just tremendous.
We had to get a wrestling hit in there, so I'm glad you mentioned that at the very end because this show isn't good without its wrestling mentions because it really, really, really makes Jeff mad, and that's the best part.
Yes, that's why we're doing it. Wait until the weekend of the baseball series against Wichita State. What are we going to – and it's WrestleMania weekend, Murph. I mean, that's –
Oh, my God.
Woo!
Oh, my God. It's going to be tough. I mean, I'm going to – I don't know. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, but that might be a tricky weekend for me.
It could be tricky for a lot of us. So we'll see how that goes.
It could be tricky for Greg Lovelady.
We may have to address that with him as we get closer to that, depending how the year goes. We'll see how that goes on that. But that'll do it for this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. For Brian Murphy, I'm Eric Lopez. We hope you've enjoyed this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret.